Has become the first person to take part in a private spacewalk, hundreds of kilometres above the surface of the Earth, or, in the words of the man himself, above the perfect world. Jared Isaacman, who chartered the Polaris Dawn mission, exited the capsule on Thursday, followed by senior SpaceX engineer Sarah Gillis. Shadia Edwards-Dashti has this report.
One small step for a privately funded billionaire, one giant leap for space travel, a historic moment for mankind.
Back at home, we all have a lot of work to do, but from here, Earth sure looks like a perfect world.
Down below, ground crew cheered as daredevil tech billionaire Jared Isaacman exited the hatch of his orbiting SpaceX Crew Dragon capsule on the world's first private spacewalk. Against a spectacular backdrop of the Earth, he can be seen carrying out new suit tests as part of the mission. Returning a few minutes later, engineer Sarah Gillis took her turn in space. The 4 private astronauts blasted into space early on Tuesday on a 5-day Polaris Dawn mission.
Looks like our first clear view of planet Earth there, our first of many for this mission.
After an actual launch, spacewalking is considered the most dangerous part of any flight, and until now, the domain of just 12 countries.
This is a major step forward in terms of space travel for humans. It also brings with it incredible risks because a lot of the technology is new. A lot of it has not been fully tested in outer space.
The entire capsule is pressurized, meaning the crew will be reliant on their spacesuits for oxygen. With the void of space as a backdrop, the crew model and test the extravehicular suits. Speaking ahead of the mission, Jared outlined the out-of-this-world ambition.
They know they need EVA capability, the knowledge of the operations and the suit in order to fulfill their long-term dream of potentially populating another planet someday.
SpaceX has these huge ambitions of getting to Mars and making life multiplanetary. And in order to get there, we need to start somewhere.
The mission was box office from start to finish, with a running commentary from Elon Musk on his platform X, taking humans the furthest traveled since the Apollo missions, and, in the words of Musk himself, striving to greater heights. Shadia Edwards-Dashti, TRT World, Earth.
Astronaut and space advocate Per Wimmer joins us now from London. Good to have you back with us, Per. This mission is historic because it is the first private spacewalk. That is, it had no government involvement or funding. It was funded purely by the tech billionaire Isaacson. What's your reaction to what we've just seen?
This is such a big day for space flight, and I'm very, very excited, to be honest, on the behalf of Jared. I met him last year here in London, and he's such a humble guy, really down to earth, excuse the pun. But to see him and the other 3 being up there in space is just delightful. And it creates a very big excitement, similar to, the 60s when we have the Gemini missions and the first EVA back then. This is a new dawn for space, and it reignites the whole interest in space, and also shows what private enterprise can do when they get involved in private space. And there's more to come. But let's be honest, this was not a mission without risk. There was a new spacesuit they have to test, and there's always danger when you do new stuff. It was a cabin that didn't have an airlock. You couldn't just step into a chamber and then on from there, you had to depressurize the entire capsule. So there were definitely risks attached to this, but fortunately, it all went well.
Yes, and what are the future implications of private space travel? Because this obviously shows that it can be done, that spacewalks can be done in a private capacity, but what real-world implications could this have apart from servicing the billionaire's needs for something more exciting?
Having people like Jared here putting hundreds of millions at stake here ends up funding the quest for further space exploration in a private capacity. This brings a lot more R&D, research and development with it, that will have positive implications on Earth. We don't necessarily see the direct connection, but because these things are difficult to do in space, you have to invent things on planet Earth from a technology point of view, from a launch capability point of view, and you will discover that suddenly you can use that in other areas of life here on planet Earth. So it does have a very big indirect effect, let alone the fact this is obviously hugely inspirational for lots of kids around the world, seeing that it's actually possible for a private person to do an extra vehicle activity, i.e. a spacewalk. And there'll be more to come. This will be a first step. No doubt you will eventually, at some point, see people, private people included, flying around the moon and eventually also landing on the moon. You know, we as humankind, we want to go further out, spend more time in space and push the boundaries. And it will also have a positive effect for NASA, because it means that NASA can then focus on deeper space and things that are perhaps less commercial eventually. So this is a win-win and a great day for space exploration.
Yes, that leads me to my next question, because we are increasingly seeing government-run space agencies like NASA essentially outsource things like the launching of satellites to companies like SpaceX, which, as we know, is owned by the billionaire Elon Musk. But in SpaceX's case, we are seeing that Elon Musk is becoming increasingly partisan, increasingly political. Is there a danger for NASA in relying too much on someone, a private individual like Elon Musk, to carry out these essential tasks in space?
No, I don't think so. And not the way things have set up. For starters, Elon doesn't own all of SpaceX. There's lots and lots of other shareholders and investors and family offices, etc., that are owners of SpaceX. Yes, he started it, but he certainly does not own 100% of the shares today. So there is governance, there's boards, there's shareholders, all sorts of things. Secondly, when NASA put up contracts, prime contracts, then they usually tend to hedge it by giving it out not to one company, but to several, so that in case one of them is a little bit behind. We've seen it in recent times, for instance, with the contracts that they gave out some time ago, both to SpaceX and to Boeing, to put transportation up to the International Space Station. And we've seen the Boeing capsule being stopped for a while on the International Space Station, and the two astronauts being having to spend another 8 months, or a total of 8 months up there before they can come back down again. And that's precisely illustrates that sometimes it can be a little bit difficult for one provider, but they always have a second provider. And that's how NASA de-risked the commercial of it. But it's net a benefit for everybody, because NASA gets a cheaper access to space through transportation and through private enterprise, because private enterprise is much better in doing that. And they can spend their dollars on deep space.
Okay, Per Wimmer, we will have to leave it there, but it's great to get your thoughts, as always, on this historic moment for space exploration.
Thank you.
It's time now for a